All of our goal here today was to make you think. That's it. All you need to do was just take a second thought. You don't have to change any of your beliefs. You don't have to change any of your behaviors. Just think. You're in high school now. You're young adults. It is time for you to start thinking about the things that you do and say and believe. Hello, happy Friday, and welcome back to the Caffeinated Classroom. If this is your first time here, my name is Marie. I'm a high school English teacher in San Diego, California. And this is one of my daily vlogs where I just kind of like take you through what's going on in my classroom. In fact, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what was going on today in my 9th grade class. Earlier this week, I vlogged a little bit about how I open up discussions regarding taboo subjects. Specifically, not even quite taboo, but like specifically how I open up a discussion regarding race and the words and hate speech that revolve around issues of race, especially in the United States. This goes along with a study of Mice and Men that we are doing. We were talking about the introduction of Crooks's character, how he is introduced, how he really doesn't get a name, and even when he does get a name, Crooks is not his actual name. That conversation, I will link that vlog up in the iCard in case you want to check that out if you haven't already. So today, the conversation that we were having was moving on, not completely moving on from our race conversation earlier this week, but it was moving on to talk about in light of the character of Curly's wife and what happens with her in chapter 5 of Mice and Men. If you know the book, you know what I'm talking about. And I wanted to talk to you guys today just about like what I do to approach these kinds of controversial topics, right? We're talking about violence against women. We're talking about violence in general. We're talking about victim shaming when these sorts of events and incidents occur in real life. And we were talking about the role of the bystander and of people who are not involved in such incidences as it pertains to Mice and Men, but also as it pertains to real life and to society and to our students' actual everyday lives on this campus, off this campus. I want to tell you guys just kind of how I approach a conversation that I know is going to be kind of difficult with my students and how I make it a level playing field for everybody. Basically, here's what I do. These sorts of conversations we will always have just a few students, maybe just one, maybe one or two, maybe there's a handful in our classrooms who will be very, very vocal. And sometimes those are really productive conversations because those particular students being really, really vocal will encourage others to be vocal in the same way. And sometimes it goes the complete opposite way. And I think that that is the experience that many of us have had in our classrooms where we open up with kind of a difficult subject or a controversial subject to talk about, and our students will have very, very strong feelings and either feel that they cannot share them, that they are unwilling to share them, or they overshare them, and they therefore alienate others from talking. Comment below if this is something that you have also experienced in your classroom. We all have, right? If we have these sorts of like full class discussions, this is something that just kind of happens. And so in order to open up this whole entire conversation, I made it very, very clear. Here's what we are talking about. We are talking about, well, actually, first we are going to be talking about gender issues, which are not just women's issues. We are going to be talking about race issues, which are not just non-white issues. We are going to be talking about all these different sorts of things, right? And I want you to know that if you are feeling willing to share something or you're feeling ready to share something, I know, and everybody in this room knows, that this is something you are sharing from your own experience and from your own observations. And if my experience and my observations are the same, what you say is going to resonate with me. And if what you're sharing is different from my experience and my observations, I might have a reaction to what you are saying. I need to know that your experience and your observation is true because it came from your point of view. The opposite that I have seen and that anybody else in here has seen, or something that's different, is also true because it comes from my experience and my observation. And we cannot tell anybody in here or anybody ever that what you've experienced is wrong because you experienced it. Or what you feel is wrong because, well, you feel it. All I can do is say, I hear you. And let me tell you, I've had a different experience. Let me share my experience as well. And framing it that way made it so that we were able to have a productive conversation regarding we kind of took a turn a few different times in our conversations in both of my classes, but in both of my classes, I brought up the question of, because we were talking about of mice and men, we were talking, not too specifically because we haven't tested on this, not all of my students have read all the way through chapter 5 of Mice and Men and what happens with Curly's wife. But in the TED Talk, it talks about how, why is it that we are talking when it talks about like women's violence? Why is our society only talking about the victim? Why aren't we talking about, well, why did the perpetrator do that versus why does this keep happening to the victim, right? It's like flipping the script. And it resonates and it makes so much sense. So this conversation definitely erupted in a few different ways, and it didn't get out of hand, and I did maintain control of at least the room and making sure that everybody could be heard and making sure that my students who raised their hands a whole ton, I just said, I appreciate that your hand's up. I just want to make sure that since you've been sharing a lot, somebody else who has something to share feels like they have time to do so. So we're just going to give it a minute, right? Like I just pulled kind of my group relations tactics out of my pocket, and I made sure that the conversation kept flowing. At the end of our conversation, I said, I want to remind you, as some of you seem kind of heated in here, and that's fine. Kids can get mad. Kids can disagree. This is the place where they can learn how to be mad and disagree and still be able to respect somebody, right? Or still be able to coexist. I said, some of you seem upset. And I don't want you to leave here upset. I do want you to leave here thinking to yourself, okay, I have heard points of view that are different from my own, and that's okay. It's okay to hear somebody else say something that they've experienced and that they believe that is the opposite from my own, and I can still be in the same room as them, and I can still exist in the same world as they exist peacefully. And at the very, very end of class, I said, I want you all to be really quiet for a minute because I'm going to say something really sincere. Thank you for being here. Those of you who spoke, thank you for speaking. And those of you who didn't speak, thank you for listening, right? Thank you for thinking. All of our goal here today was to make you think. That's it. All you need to do was just take a second thought. You don't have to change any of your beliefs. You don't have to change any of your behaviors. Just think. You're in high school now. You're young adults. It is time for you to start thinking about the things that you do and say and believe. And they very well won't change, but at least now you know that you're the one that made that decision. So these are some tactics that I use to make sure that conversations and discussions are productive. These are things that I would not do in like the first month or two of class. These are things that I wait until we have a little bit more of an established community, until I can feel out the room a little bit. And if I know that I have a couple of kiddos who are gonna go off the rails, I will even individually prep them with like, here's what we're gonna be talking about. I think you might have an opinion on it and I just want you to know. Or if I have a whole room full of really strong personalities, I will prep the entire room multiple days before we're gonna have a conversation. I will give them time. I will give them resources. Be like, hey, I'm gonna post these articles, I'm gonna post these links online. If this is a subject that we're gonna be talking about later on, if this subject is something that is like meaningful to you or that you feel like you might get heated up about, I want you to look at both sides or like all sides of this issue and just know that these are some things you might be hearing in our classroom, right? Just to try and prepare them. I don't want them to be babied and to be overly protected from conversations having to do with gender, having to do with race, having to do with class, and like all of these different sorts of issues that are very much in the literature that we are presenting to them. I don't want them to be blinded to this stuff and like just focus on the easy things to talk about in something like Of Mice and Men, but I do want them to have the tools to be okay if they get upset and be okay if they hear something that's the opposite of what they've been taught to believe or what they know to be true, and to be okay and know that they can still exist and be a part of this classroom even if they don't agree with everybody, right? Like that is a huge community building activity that we did today, and I got to send them home and say, you are all valid and you all got to be a part of this whether you spoke or not. You were listening, and that is a huge part of disagreeing with somebody, is hearing them. So yeah, I just wanted to share with you guys because like one of the things that I know I'm pretty strong at is running a class conversation. And I get questions, and I was getting questions on Instagram and on the comments on my blog, on my vlog earlier this week when we were talking about race and talking about like racial slurs and different language regarding race and race relations. And so I wanted to just kind of like tell you how I prep them. And we got into some deep stuff, and we weren't just talking about gender today. We were talking about race. We were talking about sexual orientation. We were talking about all kinds of good stuff that I was getting into with freshmen in high school. So they are more than capable. Our students are more than capable of talking about the stuff that they observe and they experience in the world. We just have to give them the tools and the language to talk about it, right? So with that, I am going to bid you adieu. It is Friday. I need to get things cleaned up. My chairs are all up so that this room can get vacuumed because it's nasty on the ground. I have things to prep for Monday, and I am going to have a really fun weekend with my family this weekend. I will tell you guys all about it next week. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you've not already subscribed, take a moment to do so. Comment down below about the conversations that you guys have in your classroom. I always love to just like pick at different tactics that other people use. I'm sharing what I do because sometimes we just don't even know where to start, and I bet there's stuff that you guys do that would really enhance what I do in my classroom. So please share the wealth. I will see you guys next time.